Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows that are the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The 100. A great episode. Sadly, we get seeing Clark. She hides Maddie away and gets captured by this group. It's also interesting because, you see the ties between the characters. Obviously, I'm going to be skipping around, but, Bellamy and the others don't want to make the same mistakes, so they're not trying to be... They're trying not to go kill crazy while you actually have Clark kind of being like that, because obviously they have their perspective of survival and kind of what that means. But obviously Clark's kind of changed her perspective on it because of living alone for like the past 6 years or so. So it's just kind of interesting when you kind of break that down like that. Just immediately right off the bat, this episode kind of establishes that. Because, she was using that one dude as a way to draw the others out. We also kind of got a first look at some of their weapons. That one weapon, it almost acts like a pulse gun because it sends out like a pulse / shockwave. It's kind of interesting. Whether all the other weapons, it seemed like it's hard to say whether those weapons always existed. Well, it kind of makes sense because we end up finding out that these guys are actually miners, apparently. They're prisoners, but they're miners, which interesting enough kind of makes them very similar to the 100 because they were miners sent off to kind of mine asteroids as well as search for other planets, because this dates back to 100 years that that ship exists. Because at first I was kind of thinking they were thinking, it's oh, these are the descendants of those prisoners. It's no, these are exactly those prisoners. They have cryogenic chambers. So basically they've been up there the entire time. Ivana, in the main group that's here right now, they're all inmates that were there 100 years ago. I was like, oh, that's a nice twist. Because you probably want to make the argument well, the fact of the matter is they're not as bloodthirsty as their predecessors. No, they kind of are, because they are those exact same prisoners who took over the ship and killed all the guards and crew. So that's all that's left are the inmates. But like I say, it's so interesting that it's kind of existed. Because it clicked in my head even more, because I thought they were talking about, I was like, oh, so would you, how did this whole situation happen? Why didn't we know about that? It's because they were sent out 100 years ago, and this is just them finding their way back now. So, because they end up asking Clark, what went down. When they say what went down, they don't mean just what went down with Prime Fire, what went down in season 4. They mean everything. Clark kind of started explaining, but obviously it didn't get to that point. Because obviously, Ivana's character kind of started thinking she was lying. You did have that one dude whose name is Shaw. I guess he's more maybe their tech dude or something like that, because he seems to be... He's also the most reasonable one, because he's kind of giving Clark a benefit of the doubt all across the board. Ivana is kind of very cutthroat and ruthless, it seems. But maybe it's just because, in all honesty, they are hardened criminals. They've all murdered people. But to be fair, it's who amongst our protagonists haven't done the same thing? These are hardened criminals, but it's interesting because they're going to be going up against our protagonists who've been through everything over the course of this series. It's these guys might be tough, but this is a tough group all on their own too. Sadly, there are few numbered. It's only Bellamy's group, Maddie, and Clark, because all those clans are still one crew is still, stuck in the bunker and all that. So it turns into that whole situation. But it's very interesting finding out that that's what their whole story is. I was literally at the end of season 4, I was like, what could that possibly mean? And it's okay, so this kind of stems back even from that. It makes you wonder, are there any other mining ships? It might not just be them. I would assume it would be, but... who's to say? That's a nice way to kind of introduce. It's no, this has already been set up long ago. Maybe they just thought the mining ship was lost, so they never bothered looking for it. So it's interesting. Because, that would also mean that it preceded, they knew about escaping to Earth, but it's because obviously Clark started explaining it, everyone thought it was one thing. Obviously it was all Allie, the reason why the Earth ended up, because Clark was she's how did the world end up this way? And she's which time? Because it's literally done it twice. So it is kind of interesting too, because it's because it's hard to say whether Clark is in the right to do what she's doing, because being who they are, especially that one dude, the one who's kind of even that one dude, Shaw, was kind of McCreary, it's don't trust that dude. He seems kind of she's she was being warned multiple times not to trust him, but for her, it's I have the army I have. I can't be picky and choosy about it. It's he has his place in this whole situation. He has his part to play too. So it seems like the way she talks about it too, it's like, I think, because it kind of threw me off, because it's like, oh, you're talking about like pilots and being part of the SEALs and stuff like that. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, well, now it makes perfect sense, because even the dude, I think his name is Shaw, like said Detroit, and he's like, he remembers that. It's like, right, because for them, the Earth ending literally happened just yesterday. You know, it's like they remember normal life. Obviously, like Clark and everyone we've known over the course of this series are descendants of those people, so they have no idea what the hell is going on, especially because they are only interacting with Sky Crew, who know everything. They haven't even gotten to the point where they're talking to the grounders who don't really know anything about all of this. So it's just an interesting thing, which also says a lot too about Ivana's character being like a SEAL person. Is like, oh, that's definitely going to be interesting. She's a very interesting type of leader. So I mean, it makes you wonder what exactly they each did. I mean, obviously we hear from Bella, and it's like, oh, robbery, murder, heard a lot of murder. It's kind of like, okay. So it makes you wonder what exactly they did. Like, was that stuff before they left the ground, or was that stuff they did when they were, like, you know, in this, you know, in space? So, but that's kind of focusing on everything on the ground. Let's talk about stuff kind of up in the air, sky, space. It is like those bastards are pretty damn tough, because it took Bellamy, Echo, and Raven working together to take the dude down. He got stabbed, and it still took Bellamy choking him out to take him down. So that's definitely not a good sign, especially when there's like a crap ton of other people. Like there was over, like, was it 280 is kind of like the final count of people on that ship. So now it's kind of interesting. But to give themselves leverage, because Murphy's all about like, nah, let's kill them, because it's like, but obviously Bellamy's not all for that plan, because obviously for Bellamy, they've literally been through that once before. Literally, that would be a repeat of the whole like Mountain Man situation at Mount Weather, because like that was a choice that took a long time for him and Clark to kind of come back from doing that. You know, I mean, definitely took Clark a very long time to forgive herself for that whole situation. And it's just like I mean, hell, they didn't even have to make that decision once, because let's not forget the City of Light situation. They kind of had to do it twice, actually. So that's a situation, because once again, that's why Bellamy was like, we don't need to make the same mistake twice. Clark sacrificed her life to make sure we don't do that, you know? So it's kind of interesting that, you know, obviously Murphy's just kind of like, well, you know, but Bellamy's like, no matter what, hey, everyone gets opinion in this. And he's like, what is yours? And Murphy's like, this is kind of a bad idea. But he's like, hey, whatever. Let's be good guys. And it's like, yeah, Murphy. It's like, you are like the most reluctant hero, essentially, because he doesn't like, you know, he plays a hero role, but he also plays up the whole, like, I don't really care, when in actuality I do. He can be selfish a lot of times, but when the time comes, he always comes through in the end. Maybe not always for the most honorable reasons, but he does. Because it leaves you in that conflicted situation, because it's like, it's not like these people are innocent, but is it still right to just kill off some people we don't really know? Because to me, that's interesting for setup, because we see what the whole situation is like with one crew, like the way things have kind of been run inside the bunker all this time. It's like, what's it going to be when all three worlds clash? Technically all four. The prisoners, Bellamy and his group from the Ark, Clark, and one crew, like when those different ways of living, of handling these past 6 years, like when those worlds collide, are they going to meld well together? Because I feel like there's definitely going to be complications. The trailers kind of show stuff, but even then it's kind of like, to be fair, I don't remember the trailers, which I'm kind of glad, because that way, like, some of the stuff will kind of be more of a surprise when it happens. Like, oh yeah, that, you know? So it's definitely going to be interesting. I think that's the thing I'm looking forward to the most, is that, like, conversation when everything and everyone comes together, you know? I mean, because one crew has the numbers, but obviously, like, it also depends on what the inmates decide to do, because it's kind of like, kind of stuck in this stalemate, because it's like, hey, we got your people hostage, it's time to negotiate, you know? So, but sadly, those circumstances meant that somebody had to stay behind, and it had to be Raven, because she's the only technical person to be able to handle it. Which Bellamy was like, you don't want to be that person to do it, because the fact of the matter is, you would have to pull the switch on killing like almost 300 people. Can you be fine with that? Like I said, like, Bellamy's been in that situation before. It's not like it's going to make this any easier, but he didn't want that to be on Raven's consciousness. Because has she actually ever had to kill anyone up to this point in the series? I feel like, I mean, everyone's had to fight to kill someone, but I can't remember, like, fight for survival, but I don't remember if she actually has or not. I feel like she has to have at some point. I'm just blanking on it right now. because amongst a lot of this stuff, a lot of conversations came up, obviously between Monty and Murphy. You know, Murphy talking about the fact is that Monty's too scared to go back down, because for Monty, it's like, we built this perfect life. We don't need to go back to the ground, because he's like, we go back to the ground, that's just going to be more infighting and stuff like that. But to be fair, it's just kind of like, because for Monty, he already said it, like, was it in the premiere? Yeah, in the premiere, like he lost so much. He doesn't want to go back to being that Monty he needed to be down there, who's got to do so much to survive. It's like, but we have everything here. But it's like the friends and family, the people you care about are down there. Like, to be, because you understand where Monty's coming from, but at the same time, it's like, it's really living in that station alone and isolated. Is that really much of a life anyway? Y'all made a promise to come back down anyway, and are you going to be willing? Are you going to break that promise? But obviously, from, like, you know, Monty's point of view, is like, look at you, Murphy. When everyone was working together, surviving all these years, what did you do? Nothing. That's even why Amori kicked him out, because Amori is like, yeah, because Murphy wasn't really contributing to helping them get back. So that's why she kicked him out. That's why they have such a problem. It's like, you know, it's like, oh, you were so pissed because Amori was trying to do something. She learned how to, like, doing some simulations and stuff like that. So she knows how to, like, pilot the shuttle and stuff like that. So it's like, you are kind of the only useless person here. You're not bringing anything to the table, which, it's kind of like something Bellamy kind of got at. Like, yeah, that's kind of Murphy's fear of, like, if he's not being the hero, he feels like he's useless because he, you know, he doesn't really have any skills to bring to the table. So I guess another reason he didn't really do anything is because, like, he really didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to contribute, you know, because, like, all of Murphy's skills have always been kind of survival. That's why him and Amori clicked, because it was like, yeah, it was us against the world type of thing. But now it kind of felt like Amori became part of the world and he was just kind of left on his own to kind of fend for himself. I'm sure that's kind of how he felt. So, but then there's a situation of, well, Raven's not staying alone because Murphy's staying. He's like, nah, it's okay. You know, like, obviously Raven was like, oh yeah, obviously there's a ship, you know, escape pod we can get into. So he decides to leave. And you see the look on Amori's face, which I think, like, even she was kind of a little sad about. She didn't really say anything, but, you know, no matter how pissed up at John she is, I think she is. There's still feelings there for both of them, because John was kind of like, oh, I can stay and help you if you want, but then she was like, why would I need your help? Like, are you just going to sit there and make jokes? And he's like, and then he snaps back. He's like, well, I'm not the one that almost got us killed, just because he was extending an olive branch. But it's just, for him, it's like, I think I was saying what's really on his mind is, I don't know, it's hard to say, like, because I was about to say sometimes he doesn't always speak his mind, but it's like, no, he does. Like, he'll be blunt about a lot of things. I guess it's speak from his heart. Like, say how he really feels. If you probably let Maury know how he really felt, then maybe there wouldn't be any issues. But hey, you know. So he stays behind with Raven. And I love the whole thing about, yeah, it's okay. He's like, yeah, you'd be bored without me and stuff like that. He's like, it's okay. I mean, if it weren't for the drop ship, obviously, I mean, the escape pod, I wouldn't be here. She's like, there isn't one. I'm like, he's like, wait, what? I'm like, that kind of makes sense. Because she didn't bring it up until that moment. That's why I was like, you're making that up, aren't you? And turns out it's the case. And then she's kind of like, yep. So she's like, she laughs because it's almost ironic, because Murphy tried to do the right thing, because he was trying to do the right thing, because last season was a big season for him and Raven, because they butted heads a lot, but they actually became very close because of last season. So I thought that was kind of nice that here we are stuck together again in this very dangerous situation, that those inmates, you know, if things go wrong, we have to be the ones responsible for killing them, which I'm sure Murphy would probably be the one to, like, you don't have to push the switch, Raven, I'll push it, you know, so. But you see him looking like, well, kind of like shit. On what level is it? I mean, I guess it's just because, like, hey, he tried to do a non-selfish thing while also still being selfish. But that selfish side of him kind of fucks him over, because it's like, oh, and trying to be good kind of screws him up, because it's like, yep, you're kind of trapped on a ship with close to 300 murderers. And it's up to you to you're basically going to be one of the keys to deciding how things kind of play out going forward, you know? So. And also, I'm sure he probably would have preferred going with Amori, because maybe spending enough time with Amori, them being together, kind of stuck on Earth again, might make him feel better. I mean, because I guess you could make the argument that Murphy's rushing to get back to how important to feel important and needed again, you know? So maybe that's a thing. I don't know. I'm definitely interested to see what kind of conversations and what goes down while they're waiting for all this to go down. I love that good on Amori, kind of like, I love that she was the one that was kind of taught how to pilot everything too. I also thought it was kind of fascinating what Echo brought up in this episode too, like how like, oh, the like before like all of this kind of knowing more about their world and stuff, Sky Crew stuff, she would have thought like even this cryostasis stuff was magic, and it's like technologically speaking, it's kind of like technological magic, but still, you get what I mean? It's so interesting. They kind of still get that point of view of like, right, this is so foreign to you guys. It's like not that foreign to them, but it is to you, someone who grew up on Earth, you know. So, but one of my favorite things is like when Maddie came to save the day, and first person she's like, "Hey, you're Bellamy," and he's like, "Wait, what? How do you know?" It's like, "Yo," because of course she can point you out amongst everybody, because it's like, "Yo, you're Bellamy." It's like Clark. Oh, Clark said you come back. And he's like, "Wait, Clark's alive?" And it's like, yeah. It's like, yeah. And even Bellamy showing up to be the one to set up the negotiations. It's kind of sad because they were torturing Clark because she was lying. It's like, no, she had no idea what was going down. Like, so I'm curious to see like the full story kind of unfold, because the thing is, this also speaks volumes to them too, because it's like, wait a minute. Because that means that Bellamy's been to the top, because he even brought back a souvenir to kind of prove it. It's like the cup from their ship. So it's like, okay, so he's really been up there. So it's like he was there and he came down here. So that's going to bring up a lot of questions, I'm sure. So, and then she's like, oh, this woman must be very important if you're going to do like, oh, betting all my people for this one person. She must be important. He's like, yeah, she is. It's like, fuck, not only just to him, to everybody. Like, Clark is legitimately the reason everyone is still alive. The only reason why the 100 have gotten this far, why any of them has gotten this far, is because of Clark. She's the one, like, she's the main focus. She's like the kick-ass leader of all of this. But she's definitely another element that's going to be interesting when Octavia kind of returns, like being like, you know, being the head of one crew and everything. So it makes you wonder how's that going to, like I said, I'm just curious to see how everything kind of comes together and clashes together. Like I said, a great episode. I'm so excited to see what goes down with all of this. It's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out in the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good